everybody, welcome to Fireside Chats with AR Farina. Today we're going to talk about how some of the supporting characters in Sense and Sensibility are sort of a commentary. Like this is, we're going to start talking about like feminism in Sense and Sensibility, but we're going to do it through the lens of some of these supporting characters. So we talked about the villains, we talked about the heroes. Well, let's talk about the steals, and let's talk about Lady Middleton and her sister Charlotte. So there's these four women. So the Steele sisters come in, and they are sort of played like, like sort of silly women. And then Charlotte, she's a lot. So it's Lady Middleton. So they're staying, the Ashwoods are staying with the Middletons. John Middleton is their cousin. Lady Middleton is his wife. His mother-in-law, her mother, lives with them too, Mrs. Jennings. And then there's her sister, Charlotte. You meet all of these women. And the way that they're handled is, it's interesting. So because we've talked about the villains, and I mentioned a couple of episodes ago about how Fanny Dashwood is definitely not women helping women. And there's definitely not a lot of that in this book. There's definitely a lot of backstabbing and a lot of harm that happens. Now when we meet the Steeles, there's a bit of a love triangle with Eleanor and Edward and Lucy. And that's this whole thing, but the Steeles are sort of like brash, and they're over the top, and they make these really, really bawdy jokes, like bawdy, air quotes, and then Mrs. Jennings does the same thing. Lady Middleton is much more reserved, but in none of the cases are they really helping each other out. They're sort of like dealing with each other, as opposed to like, hey, here's this. And what I think Jane is doing in this book by having these side characters who they're all like, oh man, and they're fighting over that, or they're fighting over money, or they're fighting over space, or they're like, and this happens in a lot of Austen's books. There's always a character who, once she's married, and this is where Charlotte comes in this, once they're married, they sort of become this like caricature of what it means to be a lady, or what it means to be a married woman, or what it means, and Mrs. Jennings, what it means to be sort of like a gossipy old lady because I'm rich and I can be. And so she's sort of commenting, obviously there's a class and a money thing. You have money so you can like afford to be a little uncouth, where the Dashwoods, they don't have any money, so they have to sort of be proper. Now of course they just are proper, that's just who they are, but there's also like this level of propriety that they can't afford to be this way, but they also can't afford to be teased, and they also can't afford to say shut up when people are being mean to them. So there's like, but imagine a world, I think Austen is telling us, imagine a world where the women were nice to each other, regardless of class, regardless of status, regardless of where you are in the world. What if everybody was just genuinely sort of nice to each other? What if the Steeles and the Dashwood sisters could just get along? Now it's hard for them to get along, because when the Steeles come in, they're so the exact opposite of loud and obnoxious or whatever. And then of course Lucy thinks she's engaged to Edward, and it's this whole thing. And technically they are, but it was like a childhood thing. With Edward being Edward, he's going to honor this, but of course he obviously clearly loves Eleanor, and Eleanor, and this is where this thing is where Eleanor swallows it. So this Eleanor is a woman helping another woman. She doesn't say to Lucy the truth. She doesn't say to even Marianne the truth, because she's like, it's not my story to tell. And so it causes a rift between Eleanor and Marianne, but because we're seeing like this level of propriety and what is the thing to do, and how Eleanor Dashwood, again, like this like amazing, almost like symbol of perfection, of goodness, of not just like feminine goodness, but like human goodness. She's doing all the right things, and then you're seeing what these other people do. And so you could say like, oh, it's a cat fight and it's all this stuff, but I don't think that's what Austen's doing. I think Austen is showing you satirically, because she's a satirist, what happens when this isn't. But then we do always get this other example of what does it look like when women help women, and when they do that, life is better. Or even if it's not better, it's like your mental health is better, or your station is better. Inside the walls of your home, maybe not your station in the world, but that is, as opposed to this idea of we're constantly making people uncomfortable, and we're like being over the top on purpose and doing all these hurtful things. So these other side characters, while I do think people can look at them and be like, Jane is making fun of women, she is, but I think she's making fun of the fact the women are even in this situation to begin with. They're sort of forced into these boxes of being like a bawdy, over the top, rich, crazy rich lady, or a really reserved lady. I have to be this, or we have to be so pious and good because we're poor and we can't do this. So instead of like, what if they're all just for people? And what if they let all that didn't matter? That your station in life didn't matter, who your parents were didn't matter, who your dad was doesn't matter, who your husband is doesn't matter, and you just get to be you. Every one of these side characters, those things, who their husband is, what their station is, and where they are in life, matter to them, and they define themselves by the men in their lives, and then it makes them caricatures where the dashwood women don't let the men define them, and that's what makes them these women helping women. So I think that's what Jane is trying to say. Of course, it's the patriarchy forcing the women into these boxes. Now, are they active participants? They are. That is the case in all of these books. They are, because they're also trying to just survive, because that's the system in which they find themselves. This isn't a choice, right? They can't just be like, I'm out of here. They have to do that. So I do think these side characters are very rich, and I really do think it's through the side characters that we get the juxtaposition to what Jane's commentary on feminism is in this particular book, as opposed to the main characters, because in the other books we have juxtapositions between the main characters themselves and what they're doing and what they're standing for and who they're standing up to, where Eleanor really doesn't stand up to anybody, and Marianne doesn't. They don't stand up to people. They just do what's right to them, and so you have this really stark contrast between here's what is right and here's what is wrong, but it's all through this lens of what is expected of them. So it's really fascinating, and I think these side characters can often become caricatures, and I think a lot of the film versions of them make them caricatures. And when we get to my version of Sense and Sensibility, that other Dashwood girl, we'll talk a little bit about what I did with those side characters and how I gave them a lot more depth, because I think there's depth there, and I think, respecting Jane, of course, but also, making it modern and realizing, like, there's another way. So anyway, that's that. So join us in a couple more weeks. We'll talk about the clergy, and then in a couple weeks in there, we'll talk about the military, and then we'll start talking about that other Dashwood girl. So we're zipping right through Sense and Sensibility. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.